country in Africa that are oftentimes off the grid, but there are some similarities nonetheless. But for me to answer the question, why does education really matter, I want to just profile two girls in India. One is Geeta Singh, and she is accessing one of our, she's one of our 11,000 girls on long-term holistic scholarships. She's reading in one of our 12,000 libraries around the world. She's accessing one of our 8 million children's books. She's in 9th grade, and I think that should say thriving instead of striving, although maybe both are true, in a school in rural India. Her cousin's just a little different, but a very similar story, in that she dropped out in 3rd grade and she really never, quote, fit in. Girls oftentimes don't. There was also certainly an issue of family income. Being functionally illiterate, she faces really very little employment future in India. I want to answer the question why education really matters. Let's look at the difference the lives would make between these two girls. First of all, Geeta, because of her 9 years of education, she's going to make about twice as much as her cousin. In terms of family size, Geeta will marry later and have an average family size of 4, whereas Lena will have 6.2 children. If we take the illiterate girls, we multiply by that 2.2 differential, we're talking about 1.3 billion children difference. We're also talking about manageable family sizes. AIDS ravages the developing world as it does a little bit in this country as well. AIDS orphans do as well in the developing world. Geeta, because of her education, is 50% less likely to contract AIDS. Infant mortality, 50% less likely that she would have a child die in infancy. My slides are going crazy. The last one is, why does it matter? Because there's an incredible ripple effect with education. There's a ripple effect because educated mothers and educated fathers, in case of 9 years of education, they're going to have their kids go through 5 additional years of education. So it's not only the investment we make today, it's the investment that ripples down for generations to come. So this is how the World Bank president talks about education. All agree that the single most important key to development and to poverty alleviation is education. The UNESCO describes it just a little bit differently, and given we're focused on literacy, they say that literacy has never been more necessary for development. It's the key to communication and learning of all kinds, and a functional condition to access today's knowledge society. So it all starts with literacy. I throw in this statistic about America because it tells us about literacy is important wherever we go. In America, 3 or 4 on welfare, they're illiterate. 85% of unwed mothers, 68% of those arrested are all illiterate. 3 and 5 who fill our prison cells, illiterate. So there's such a correlation between literacy, education, and the promise down the road. The global challenges are huge. I talked about this slight difference between the breadth and depth of our challenges. They're big in this country, but 800 million people can neither read nor write. 1 out of 3 children in the world never see the inside of a classroom beyond the 3rd grade. And the third statistic is really interesting because what you'll read about is the fact that 200 million more children are going to school now than 5 years ago. But what that doesn't tell you is what they're learning. The average child in the developing world, and I think there's statistics certainly in this country as well, the average child in the developing world is in the 6th grade having a 1st to 2nd grade level of literacy, level of math skills. That's not education. That's not school. That's a really expensive form of daycare. And we face it in this country too. And so it's the statistics we can hide behind, but unless we measure and evaluate at every turn, what will end up is not fully all the story. I throw this slide in to just talk about what we're doing in India, building a lot of libraries, 1,000 more a year, and you can read the statistics. The reason that I mention this, bring up this slide, is people say, wow, you're doing a lot in India, that's incredible. Well, yes and no. By the year 2020, half of all the world's illiterate will be in India. Think about that. Half of all the world's illiterate will be in India. So this just scrapes the surface. We talked earlier in one of the sessions about this demographic dividend versus a demographic disaster. Well, that's what we face if we don't get our head around the fact that a third of all of India are aged 13 years and less. If we miss it, we're going to miss 2 generations. So we need to be very, very focused on results. So I want to spend the last 2 or 3 minutes just talking about what we've learned in 10 years. What we've learned is we've been across the globe, 12,000 libraries, 12,000 girls on long-term scholarships, 1,500 schools, and now what we're doing, as well as now what we're doing, is we're partnering with Ministry of Education at the highest levels to talk about promoting literacy in the classrooms by educating the teachers with the latest technology, the latest, some with a very small t technology, but mostly with the latest research. So the next slide, you might think, why am I putting this in? We get our funding, 1/3 from corporations, foundations, 2/3 from private philanthropy. Why I bring it to bear is education's expensive. We're going to have to talk about public-private partnerships. We're going to have to talk about, with this great transfer of wealth over the last 50 years, where the money is really within individuals. And 2/3 of our funding is through people like yourselves around the world, half inside this country and half